Sales of Love Sexy could not be improved by a tour of America, which Prince undertook only under duress from both his management company and his record label. Many venues on the tour were undersold. Undeterred, Prince began to hatch plans for a new film, returning to the characters established in Purple Rain. This perhaps was an attempt to return to the glory days of Purple Rain itself. If so, it was a disastrous and ill-conceived attempt, during which Prince seemed to sack anyone in his inner circle who did not enthusiastically support him. This included his management team, who had steered him through 10 years of global stardom. Others who had given both him and the film project a wide berth after tentative initial involvement were Madonna and Kim Basinger. Basinger had starred opposite Michael Keaton in Tim Burton's film Batman, which also starred Jack Nicholson as the Joker. The film featured 2 soundtracks, one by orchestral composer Danny Elfman and another offshoot LP by Prince. Although not much of Prince's music was featured in the film's final cut, the affiliation with the film, a hugely successful blockbuster in the summer of 1989, gave him a #1 album, selling over 4 million copies worldwide. But when it came to Prince's own film, a foolish vanity project entitled Graffiti Bridge, no amount of denial by its writer, director and central star could disguise the fact that it was a complete turkey. Prince would never make another full-length feature film, and its total commercial and, some would argue, artistic failure drove yet another nail in the coffin of his increasingly beleaguered reputation. The soundtrack album, released on August 20th, 1990, though not a Prince classic, was warmly received by some critics, but performed little better than Love Sexy in terms of sales. A new decade had arrived, and the future no longer belonged to Prince Rogers Nelson.
Like, if everybody wears the same clothes, then it's, it ain't cool no more. You're trying to be different. One can't be different by being racy today. It's not interesting anymore. See, sexiness was in the mind. It was in your imagination. When you lose that, then, like I said, it's just old skin.
The emergence of rap and hip-hop through the 1980s would have been impossible without the radical expansion of digital technology. For the first time, a form of music was emerging that was built almost exclusively around other people's music, managed by lifting samples from their records. These samples could be riffs or drum breaks or entire musical phrases, all presented in radically new contexts and overlaid with spoken word rhymes that quickly formed one of the most exciting, subversive and reviled oral traditions since the first stirring of the blues almost a century before. Black musicians were no longer to put up with being the stooges of a racist, white-dominated music industry. Acts like Public Enemy, Run DMC, Ice-T and Dr. Dre were establishing a revolution, fought both literally and metaphorically on the streets of Los Angeles, New York and other American inner cities, and in their recording studios. It was the beginning of the end of global pop music as exclusively a stadium-fed opiate for the world's middle-earning masses. Prince's initial reaction to rap was to decry it as a base musical form, if indeed it was a form of music at all. But when he saw how popular and powerful it was becoming, his attitude changed. Prince now had a new band, the New Power Generation. Only keyboard player Matt Fink survived from the revolution. Prince's touring drummer Sheila E. had been replaced by Michael Bland. A new bassist, Sonny Thompson, was brought in, and former touring and recording bassist Levi Seeker moved to guitar. In an attempt to try to appear hip to the new urban music scene, Prince hired a group of black dancers called the Game Boys and a singer, Rosie Gaines. When it emerged that Tony Mosley, a member of the Game Boys, also rapped, he was immediately co-opted as Prince's answer to the dominant urban musical force of the time. Suddenly, Prince was into rap. The results were not convincing and were neither good Prince nor good rap. Rapping is a demanding, highly creative and competitive art form, and those who are good are usually very good, while those who are mediocre are embarrassing. Unfortunately, Prince didn't seem to know the difference, which was hardly likely to endear him to the homeboys he was so desperately keen to impress. For the first time in his creative life, he was a black man seriously out of his depth in his involvement with a black art form. The Prince of future funk was never going to be the future Prince of hip-hop. Prince continued his fascination with taking unworldly women and trying to turn them into star-struck protégés with a naive country girl called Tara Lee Patrick, a white girl from Ohio reinvented as Carmen Electra and inducted into the new power generation. Also at this time, Matt Fink, Prince's last remaining link with a past that had been populated by talented people who had alternatively challenged and supported him, was replaced by Tommy Elm, renamed Tommy Barbarella, inspired by the character played by Jane Fonda in the subversive, sexy, swinging 60s film of the same name. The focus was now firmly on support rather than challenge, and in both his private and professional lives, Prince seemed inclined only to involve people who were impressionable and easily manipulated. Gone was to be any conceivable element of dissent.
In year 2000, once I changed my name back and the war was finished with my so-called enemies, I started reading the Bible intensely, and I come to find out that this is the truth.
Prince took his new band into rehearsal and began to develop the music that would form his new album, Diamonds and Pearls, which was released in October 1991 and represented something of a comeback. A tightly rehearsed tour and blanket coverage in the media, though not all complimentary, ensured that the album became a #3 pop hit and sped to #1 in the R&B charts. Ultimately, it sold over 8 million copies worldwide and became Prince's biggest-selling record since Purple Rain. Essentially, though, it was a somewhat hollow and conservative album and did nothing to revive Prince's reputation as a fearless innovator. Gone almost completely was his distinctive use of the trusty Linn drum machine, and much of its supposedly streetwise veneer was misinformed and slightly embarrassing. Yet still, one could not argue in commercial terms with its impressive sales. And for many, a release by Prince was still a major event by a historically important artist, and not something to be dismissed lightly. Finally, late in 1992, Prince released the album that was almost to sink his recording career for good. It was represented by a single, unpronounceable symbol that was reminiscent of the universal generic signs for male and female. It contained more music in the general style of Diamonds and Pearls, but lacked either its predecessor's commercial potential or its melodic strengths. In short, it was something of a disaster and furthered Prince's alienation from what was left in his life of the real world, rather than the constructed fantasy world in which Prince was still a vibrant creative artist to whom no one could defensively say anything critical about his rapidly degenerating creative powers, nor about his increasingly fragile grip on reality. All this came at an inopportune moment, as Warner Brothers, faced with either losing one of their flagship artists to an eager competitor or negotiating a wildly extravagant deal for the future, opted for the latter. This had become something of a curious industry practice, where many acts who had previously been able to sell millions of records found their stock in rapid decline, and yet were able to negotiate fantasy figure deals based on their past glories and status within the industry. One of the highest profile of these was REM, whose $80 million deal with Warner defied logic or common sense. Such a move precipitated a curious alternative universe, in which R.E.M's ubiquitous presence year after year in the media, designed to rake back some of the capital so lavishly and foolishly wasted, seemed totally at odds with the group's inability to generate music that people actually wanted to listen to for its own merits, rather than out of habit or a perverse kind of brand loyalty. Prince could be said to be in a similar position in many respects, as it seemed that nobody any longer wanted to listen to his music. Also, his band, the New Power Generation, apparently felt that Prince was rapidly losing whatever was left of the plot for him to lose. Similarly, his record company felt disinclined to release his newly recorded album Gold Nigger, a disastrous affair built around the nebulous talents of Tony Mosley, as they felt he was saturating the market with below-par material, and wanted instead to issue a greatest hits package, the time-honoured industry response to an artist's declining status. With this simple device, all concerned, fans and media alike, can wallow in fond nostalgic memories and admit to themselves that they preferred this rose-tinted perception of their shared past to the uncomfortable truth. No one wanted to face the depressing fact that Prince might actually be washed up for real. Furthermore, Prince's insistence that he now changed his name to that of the literally unspeakable symbol and would be henceforth known as the artist formerly known as Prince made him into a laughing stock. Such an overarching delusion of grandeur could only be met with derision, so impossible was it to be taken seriously. Warner got their way with a nostalgic fest greatest hits package, reminding us all that Prince was a truly great figure in popular music, capable of knocking off hits for other people of the calibre of Manic Monday for the Bangles, or Nothing Compares to You given to Sinead O'Connor. Prince, on the other hand, created two very different albums, one entitled Come, to be released by Prince, the other to be called The Gold Experience and to be released under the aegis of his mysterious symbol. In the end, it was Come that was actually released. It was not a good album and did little to improve Prince's current commercial status. This was ultimately untimely, as it began to emerge that he was in deep financial trouble. All this was rendered even more confusing by the release of a worldwide smash hit single called The Most Beautiful Girl in the World on his own newly inaugurated NPG Records. The single showed that Prince still had what it took to be a world-class artist, but chose seldom to show it or build upon it. These feelings were to be confounded, however, on September the 26th, 1995, with the release of The Gold Experience. It turned out, against the odds, to be his best record since Sign of the Times, a radical return to form that would have brought joy to his record label's hearts, if only they could have released it as an album by Prince. Its sales were unimpressive, and Warner Brothers were beginning to feel that if they could somehow be rid of Prince with all his irritating and counterproductive flights of fancy, the world would be a better place. Accordingly, they got their wish a year later, when Prince delivered two albums, Chaos and Disorder and Old Friends for Sale. The latter had been cobbled together from Prince's private collection of songs that had, for one reason or another, been consigned to the dumper over the years, over 300 of them. Both records were derisory offerings that got him out of his contract with the label and made everyone happy, for any reason other than the music contained in the albums. Prince was at last free to do as he chose, a slave released from bondage.
I don't really care so much what people say about me because it usually is a reflection of who they are. For example, if people wish I would sound like I used to sound, then it says more about them than it does me. If I change the lyrics to a song, then it begs the question, why do you want me to curse? Why do you want me to talk like other people? See, cursing was cool when nobody was doing it, but just a couple people.
In February 1996, Prince married 20-year-old Mate Garcia, who was pregnant with their child. He then embarked on an energetic campaign to assure the world that he was now a stable, monogamous family man. Though the world is doubtless peopled by an abundance of such men, it might be that few of them released the kind of iconoclastic records that Prince was celebrated for early in his career. And this new declaration may not have augured well for the future. In October 1996, Prince released his first album since the split with Warner Brothers, a 3-CD set called appropriately Emancipation. But personal tragedy was to cloud what should have been a happy time. Prince and mate's child was born with a rare genetic disorder and lived only a week. Prince went into energetic denial. His relationship with mate began to flounder during a lengthy tour to promote emancipation, and less than 2 years later it was clear that their marriage was over. In the summer of 1997, Prince released a sprawling, inconsistent 5-CD set of outtakes and collaborations of radically diverse quality called Crystal Ball, available initially as an internet-only release. Aimed primarily at long-term fans, it was essentially a huge disappointment. Even Prince's staunchest allies were unimpressed. A year later, on the 20th of June 1998, he released a new album, New Power Soul, effectively a solo album which managed sales of 100,000. Subsequently, he signed a one-album deal with Arista Records, a project that was the brainchild of legendary music biz supremo Clive Davis, who had recently masterminded an astonishingly successful comeback album for Carlos Santana, the former 1970s Latino rock guitarist, now reinvented as a father figure to the massive Hispanic market emerging in the United States. His album, Supernatural, featured duets with many of the young heroes of the R&B and hip-hop fraternity and sold over 9 million copies worldwide. It was hoped that a similar miracle could be worked for Prince, and he received a massive $10 million advance. When it came to it, the album, Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic, was weak, despite the many celebrity collaborations in the style of Supernatural. Released on November 9th, 1999, it rapidly disappeared from the charts, having failed dismally to reignite any long-term interest in another Prince comeback. In February 2001, Prince inaugurated the New Power Generation Music Club, an internet-only collectors fraternity that enabled fans to download unreleased material and gain privileged access to concert seats. All this for a mere $100 a year. In December of that year, a new album was released called The Rainbow Children, a record heavily influenced by Prince's newfound allegiance to the Jehovah's Witness movement. This had been sparked by his friendship of several years with Larry Graham, Sly Stone's original bass player and leader of Graham Central Station, a funk band that had become, during the latter half of the 1990s, a Sly Stone tribute band. Unhappily, Prince's new spiritual path seemed to demand that he reflect the kind of intolerance so often associated with minority religions. The Rainbow Children was by turns anti-Semitic, homophobic, xenophobic and sexist. He had also renounced using sexual profanities in his songs, and as such no longer seemed to be Prince, but a reinvented New Age apologist for the artist formerly known as Prince. A new set released in 2003, NEWS, broke little new ground, but that year did see Prince's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at the age of 44. Now a bona fide pop music legend, this award and a new marriage seemed to level him out. In 2004, he released his strongest album for many years, called Musicologist, a title that signalled that he was referring on many tracks to the acknowledged masters of the 20th century black music, with nods to Stevie Wonder, George Clinton and James Brown. It seemed to present a revitalised Prince, one now divested of much of the bitterness and anger that had characterised his work for almost 10 years. And what of the future for Prince? As a man approaching his 50s, his most energetic years are behind him. If his new marriage works out, he can look forward to a future hopefully devoid of the emotional tensions he has experienced in the past, and simply enjoy being Prince. relishing his position as an elder statesman of black music, secure in the knowledge that he helped change the world of pop and has contributed to the happiness of his many millions of fans, past and present. There's no disgrace in that.
Thank you for buying Maximum Prints. We hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for further titles on Chrome Dreams coming up soon. If you did enjoy or have any comments or suggestions, write to us at Chrome Dreams, PO Box 230, New Malden, Surrey, UK, KT3 6YY, or email on mail@chromedreams.co.uk. Details of our full catalogue are listed on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye for now.